Last broadcast of the year from Studio North. Headline: Sinwar is dead and the Guardians are alive. That's my whole day yesterday. It began during the program when I brought you the breaking news that Yahya Sinwar had been found and killed by the Israeli Defense Forces. That is the beginning of the day after Hamas, according to Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, Joe Biden said something idiotic when he got to Berlin last night for a meeting. He said it is... now is the time to move on. Move on towards a ceasefire in Gaza. Make sure that we move in a direction that we're going to be in a position to make things better for the world. Really sounds like Dana Carvey now. So that was kind of a nightmare. The president and the law of Gates applies. He's always wrong on national security. So if he says it's over, now's the time to push hard. Hats off to the Israelis. It has been a year and a week since the terrible massacre of 1,200 Israelis, the kidnapping of 250. First thing we should do today is pray for the 101, however many of them are alive, hostages, because Sinwar's crazy brother Muhammad, who is apparently just a sociopath of a greater order than his older brother was, is in control now, and he may do anything. He's been offered a way out. The Israelis have said there's nothing left but the rubble. We can keep bouncing it. We're going to destroy your tunnels, but we'll let you go. We'll let you leave like we let Arafat leave Lebanon after the first Lebanon war back in the 80s. But no word yet. There's nothing the United States can do about this. All we can do is shut up and keep the weapons going because Israel's knocked off Hanaya in Iran, in their Blair House in Iran. They've knocked off Yahya Sinwar, DF, the head of the combat side of Hamas. So the political leader, the military leader in the Strip, and the chief of staff of the military operations in the Strip. 20,000 Hamas fighters as well are dead. Gaza's in ruins, of course. This is everything that Hamas brought for Israel. And the Israelis are now methodically dissembling Hezbollah, having killed Nasrallah, his chief of staff, everyone on the Shura Council, everybody in the Radwan force, and now they're moving methodically at great cost. More than 350 IDF soldiers have been killed in Israel, and at least 11 have been killed, many other wounded in Lebanon. So don't look away from the grim realities. But the greatest danger right now is to the at least 50 hostages that are alive. And Israel will let everyone walk away who wants to get on a boat and go to Tehran. They need the hostages back. Pray for the hostages. Now about baseball. Donald Trump coming up. He gave a lot of fun remarks at the Al Smith dinner last night that Kamala Harris skipped because nobody liked Kamala Harris. People just don't like her. You cannot make her into a likable person. He was very gracious of Donald Trump when he was asked at the Univision Town Hall. So, well, she seems like a nice person. She's not likable. She's just not. And so the bottom's falling out. Trump is now ahead in the Real Clear Politics average of every swing state. He's now ahead. He's ahead in the futures market. All he has to do is finish strong. He did a great job at the Al Smith dinner last night. But I was watching the Guardians and the Yankees. Now, the Guardians went into Game 3 of the American League Championship Series down 2-0. They had lost. They had to win last night. They had to win. And they were 3-1. They were up 3-1 going into the 7th. And Cade Smith had come down and mowed down 3. And then Hunter Gaddis showed up. And Gaddis was good for 2. But he walked somebody. So go to Class A, the killer, Wild Thing. And he gives up back-to-back taters. One of them had to go to Aaron Judge because my grandson will never. And I thought it was then at that point, 4-3, the Yankees had another run in the 8th, 5-3. I'm thinking it's over. I've turned off the TV in disgust, but then I turn it back on because, you never know. Big things happen. And they managed to get a base runner in the 9th. They're down 5-3. And Big Christmas, Johnsky Noel, his nickname is Big Christmas. He's a rookie. Comes up to the plate, cut number 24. Myself, this can't be. We go to the 10th. Pedro Avila, of whom I have never heard. I've seen him in print. They added him to the roster. I've never seen him play. I don't know why they added him for the roster for the American League Championship Series. And I had texted one of my friends who's following me, I don't know who we're going to pitch. We're done. All of our relievers are done. They bring out Pedro Avila. Whoever he is, he looks like he's been drinking beer for 5 years and nothing else. He makes Mickey Lolich look like a myphdweightloss.com success story. So Pedro Avila manages to set down the Yankees 1-2-3 in the 10th, and I'm thinking, how we just got to get a run. We got to get a run. And sure enough, we get a single out of Jimenez, which is, next to impossible to imagine. And then up comes David Fry, he who saved the American League Divisional Series against the Tigers, cut 25. Full house at Progressive Field. It was cold. My voice is gone a little bit because I was yelling just like everyone in the stadium. What a great game. What a memorable moment. What a great game. And Yankees fans, you can go sit on it. Now the Tribe's got to come back. I revert sometimes to Indians talk. The Guardians have got to come back. They're down 2-1. They got 2 more at home. Got to go back to Yankee Stadium and win one. But let's not get the cart ahead of the horse. Donald Trump, meanwhile, goes to New York to the Al Smith dinner. Cut number 13.
Tradition holds that I'm supposed to tell a few self-deprecating jokes this evening. So here it goes. Nope. I've got nothing. There's nothing to say. I guess I just don't see the point of taking shots at myself when other people have been shooting at me for a hell of a long time, and they shoot hard.
That, by the way, is pretty dang funny. Cut number 14.
It's a true pleasure to be with you this evening. Amazing pleasure. And these days, it's really a pleasure anywhere in New York without a subpoena for my appearance.
Cut number 15.
But if you really wanted Vice President Harris to accept your invitation, I guess you should have told her the funds were going to bail out the looters and rioters in Minneapolis, and she would have been here, guaranteed she would have been here. Guaranteed.
Cut number 16.
Campaigning can take a toll on a family and family life, although I hear that Kamala and her husband carve out some really beautiful alone time at the end of the day for an intimate dinner, just Doug, her, and a teleprompter that she uses quite well.
Cut number 17.
A major issue in this race is child care, and Kamala has put forward
Play cut 17. Don't play cut 17. Cut number 18.
There's a group called White Dudes for Harris. Have you seen this? White Dudes for Harris. Anybody know? Are some of you here? White Dudes for Harris? Doesn't sound like it. But I'm not worried about them at all because their wives and their wives' lovers are all voting for me. Everyone.
Cut number 19. Gotta remember earlier this week, the scandal among Catholics in America is Gretchen Whitmer was mocking fun of Holy Communion. Cut number 19.
All polls are indicating I'm leading big with the Catholic vote, as I should be. But I don't think Kamala has given up yet. She hasn't. Instead of attending tonight, she's in Michigan receiving communion from Gretchen Whitmer.
Cut number 20.
I know Kamala's word because she spends a lot of time complaining. I won't agree to another debate. But the truth is I've debated twice this year, once against Joe Biden and once against David Muir of ABC.
And then one more, cut number 22.
Well, I'd better wrap up because Mayor Adams told me earlier that I needed to make this one very quick, especially the city has reserved this room for a large group of illegal aliens coming in from Texas. That's right. They've reserved many rooms.
The Al Smith dinner, Kamala Harris was too afraid to come. It's the first time a Democrat skipped since 1984. That Democrat was named Walter Mondale. And I think she's headed for a Mondale-like blowout. I want to say Donald Trump is a very funny and charming man. And yeah, you can get mad at him. I have. He's been mad at me. That's fine. Doesn't matter. I've been mad at my best friends before. But what a day yesterday. Sinwar dead, the Guardians alive, and Donald Trump on a roll. Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzan Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. You know, this was a week that started out in one direction and ended up going in quite another. And so does my poem. Things are looking better, but we shouldn't be complacent, though I see a lot of people being confident, adjacent. The race is to the swiftest, but the mood can change so fast. You may be very speedy, but still find you finished last. Wait a minute. Stop the presses. Put to bed the next election. Go and get that guy we fired when we had a science section. While the world was wary, waiting for October's big surprise, I think what we just witnessed was a wonder in the skies. I've been giddy and ecstatic. That's the way one should react when a work of science fiction has become a science fact. It's been said that human effort and an engineering mind can accomplish any challenge once that problem is defined. We don't have to see the planets far away the way we used to, since a pair of giant chopsticks just caught a 24-ton booster. I was born a
Oh,
space age baby.
oh.
I was born a space age baby, and it's been a lot to swallow when we stopped what we were doing when we finished with Apollo. So let's halt that downward spiral and start looking toward the stars. How I'd love to be the first to write some poetry on Mars. That's a change, of course, by Tarzan Joe.
Joe, I love that. But Boosta? Is that even
Booster.
fair?
I come from
Boosta?
Long Island, and I saw the booster get caught by the gantry.
Boosta. I also like the phrase confident adjacent. That's what I am,
Uh,
but I hate to be close to confident. I'm confident adjacent, but I don't even like being there. It's a
yeah, I
great
got those
term.
two ideas. I got those two ideas in the same poem. It's just like a reusable rocket, my poetry.
There, it is Boosta all the time and confident adjacent. If anyone has a poetry need for any occasion, write to Joe at tarzanajoe@reagan.com, tarzanajoe@reagan.com. And if you want to hear that again or read it again, the Boosta and the confidence adjacent, it will be posted at tarzanajoe.com. By the way, Joe, do you ever post your reading of the poems?
Audio files, no, I haven't, but I just wrote a poem for someone, and they requested that I send them an audio. It's kind of a love letter to his family for Christmas. You mentioned writing Christmas poems, and he requested that. So I do that for clients if they want it.
A voiceover available. You know what? If you're a voiceover, do you have a voiceover agent, Joe?
No, no.
You need one.
Although
You
I
have a
do a
great
very
voice.
good Barney Rubble.
But no one knows who Barney Rubble is, Joe. Honest to goodness, we
That's why I
cannot
don't
date
have an
ourselves.
agent. That's why I don't have an agent.
Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com for your poetry needs. Tarzana Joe at Reagan.com. And that poem will be posted at tarzanajoe.com. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Hugh.
And one more cut to transition back to news. Donald Trump at the Al Smith dinner last night, cut 21.
Coming in very, very strong, a certain way. I won't tell you what way that is, but Chuck Schumer is here looking very glum. Doesn't he look glum? He looks glum. But look on the bright side, Chuck, considering how woke your party has become. If Kamala loses, you still have a chance to become the first woman president.
Poor Chuck Schumer at that point is shaking his head. That's pretty funny, and everyone knows it. Al Smith, he dominated the Al Smith dinner, and Kamala Harris put out a press release saying he bombed. Gosh, he's crazy. About to explain to you why Sinwar is dead, the Guardians are alive, and nuclear power is resurrected. Let me first remind all of you, we are still doing our best to help out in North Carolina and Florida and Tennessee. Food for the Poor, it's the last day of their sponsored appeal, of which I am a part. Actually, Mrs. Hewitt and I contributed on day one. Finally got Gallagher to contribute last night, so he got ahead of me briefly, but I'm sure this audience will step up on this last day to send food and emergency supplies into the hardest hit regions of the mountains of North Carolina and East Tennessee. Florida is pretty much back on its feet, though, of course, many people will be years in rebuilding their businesses. They've got to find a new place to live. Food for the Poor is doing emergency relief help. Their banner is at hughhewitt.com. Please be generous. I can't have Gallagher beat me again. This audience is better than Gallagher's audience. You know that. Go over to hughhewitt.com. Be as generous as possible. Now, I have a friend, Dan Poneman, who I caught up with yesterday afternoon because I had read two stories which I will discuss with Dan, and I thought this audience ought to know first that nuclear power is resurrected. Here's my conversation with former Deputy Secretary of Energy, Dan Poneman. I have often told you that I've been blessed to know some really smart people in my life: Mitt Romney, John Roberts, Richard Nixon. I always tell people, and they don't believe me, the smartest guy I know is Dan Poneman, who I met in college some 48 years ago. And Dan is too humble to acknowledge that. But he joins us this morning because he is Mr. Nuclear. He is former Deputy Secretary of Energy in the Obama administration. He also worked for George H.W. Bush on the National Security Council when he was a young man. He has never not been Mr. Nuclear. Good morning, Dan. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning, Hugh. Great to see you.
Now, I want to begin by telling people when we talk about nuclear power, and we're going to talk about nuclear power here because it's breaking out, I do so with an unabashed enthusiast, even though he is a Democrat, and even though he might be an independent, and even though he is very much concerned with global warming. You have never not been a fan of nuclear energy. Is that a fair thing to say, Dan Poneman?
Well, I would say I learned about it first, and what I learned told me, as Eisenhower told us in 1953, that if we harness it responsibly, it can bring enormous benefit to humanity.
Now, one of our mutual friends, the ambassador of the United Arab Emirates to the United States, Youssef Al Otaiba, told me that you were instrumental in getting their nuclear power program underway. What is it that UAE did? Because I think we're going to see a lot more of that around the world, and I want the same standard to be established.
It's a great story, Hugh, because they came to us when I was still working with General Scowcroft in the early 2000s and said, we have enormous power demands coming up for desalination, for urbanization, and so forth, and we don't have the infrastructure. So we need to either build a massive amount of coal or a massive amount of nuclear, and we don't have either. And they were already committed, you may know about their Masdar project, to a low carbon future. And so they were very attracted to nuclear energy. And in talking to people in the United States, my colleagues and I at Scowcroft Group, we said, look, the logic and the economics that you're sketching out to us make all kinds of sense, but it's a very dangerous neighborhood. And so you should probably be sure to assure the international community that your intentions are peaceful. So they, from the very beginning, said, we are going to build nuclear power reactors. We're not going to build the dangerous fuel cycle facilities that cause concern in terms of enriched uranium or plutonium that could be diverted. And after that, they hired the highest qualified regulators. They hired the highest qualified security experts, and they did not cut any corners. They put the most responsible regulatory regime in effect. It's very rigorous. They put the most contract controlled project on the planet to work so that their project came in on budget and on time. And it really became the example of how to do a new nuclear power program from scratch responsibly. And now they have four beautiful reactors at Baraka. I've been there a couple times in the desert, providing enormous amounts of clean energy to the UAE.
Now, this is the future for every developing country, but it also might be the future for the United States, which brings me to two stories, the reason I asked Dan to come back. Story number one comes from September. Why Microsoft made a deal to help restart 3 Mile Island. Story number two came from the Financial Times only a couple of days ago. Google orders small modular nuclear reactors for its data centers. I want to ask you about both of those in turn because they're very different stories. Dan Poneman, why did Microsoft buy 3 Mile Island?
Hugh, the context of this is the AI revolution. There is a vertiginous increase in electricity demand in this country and globally. Electricity demand, as you know, had been very, very flat for a long period of time. Now, according to the US Department of Energy, in 2023, they estimated we need 700 gigawatts of new power generation just between now and 2050 to hit net zero targets. And then just a few weeks ago, they modified that number to up to 900 gigawatts. 200 gigawatts of new power. It's extraordinary. Just for data centers alone, the demand in the United States is going from about 20 gigawatts now to 70 gigawatts in 2030. And we need every jot and tittle of power to satisfy that burgeoning need. We want to win the AI race, as you know. And these companies, the hyperscalers, Amazon, Google, Meta, all of them want clean energy. And there's only one way to get massive amounts of clean energy deployed at scale in the U.S. grid, and that's nuclear. And that's what you're seeing in that story. So there you have a recently closed nuclear power plant. It's tragic that so many very good, well-operated plants had to shut down in recent years for a variety of market distortions. And now they said, look, we need that power. We're going to reopen that plant. And Constellation Power has agreed to buy 20 years worth of output of that formerly shuttered 3 Mile Island plant, which was always a good plant. It was not the unit that was affected by the accident back in '79. And I think you will see more plants. If those that have been shut recently and are still able to be recovered can be recovered, people are going to be taking a very close look at doing that.
Now, Dan Poneman, I used to live next to San Onofre. President Nixon put his office next to San Onofre. That was, to me, the demonstration that if the President of the United States doesn't worry about nuclear power plants, I shouldn't worry about nuclear power plants. Is there any life left in San Onofre, to your knowledge? I mean, how many plants are out there that can be repurposed, reopened, and put to use?
Distressingly few, because what happens, Hugh, is after a while you do things in the decommissioning phase that are very hard to reverse. San Onofre shut down long ago enough. I doubt that they are a likely candidate. But just in the last few years, Hugh, we had up to 104 operating reactors. And now with Vogtle, I think we're at 94 again. So, but I think probably to take an initial look, some of those 10 may be able to be restarted. Palisades, I think you're going to see being restarted, but it's going to have to be done really on a case-by-case basis to see how far along in the decommissioning process they are, if they can basically reverse it.
If a company came to you and they are an AI-driven company, whether it's Meta or Google or Amazon, and they want to get as much power secured as they can, as quickly as they can, would you advise them to go buy one of the old plants and get it open that can be opened, or go and get the new modular nukes that Google is investing in?
Well, it's going to depend on their specific circumstances, where they need the power, what they need. Basically, you've heard me, you've heard my successor, Dan Briette, talk about all of the above. They're going to look at everything. They're going to look at existing plants and whether they can be uprated, take existing plants and just increase the capacity of those plants to produce. They will look, and they have looked at recently shuttered plants to see which of those can be reopened. They will certainly look, and you've seen that in the recent announcements from Google, for example, and Amazon at the small modular reactors that are now very popular. But given the enormous scale, Hugh, of the demand that I'm telling you about, they're going to look at building brand new plants. Now, there was some distress because the big plants that were finished down in Georgia, the sort of classic 1,000 megawatt plants, were obviously very late and very over budget. But we have a steep learning curve. But to fill the hole that I'm telling you about that are in tens of gigawatts or over time hundreds of gigawatts, I predict you are going to see all of this. You're going to see old plants reopened. You're going to see existing plants uprated. You're going to see small modular reactors, and you're going to see big reactors, that sort of traditional one gigawatt reactors. I think all of that is in play.
All right, I'll stop right there. I'm going to continue with my conversation with Dan after the break. We talked for a long time because it's an important subject, and the markets are taking note of it. And I invest in only 3 companies. I'm a mutual fund guy because I'm not smart enough to do anything. I have gold, real estate, and 3 companies and mutual funds. That's how the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I have invested for all these years. One of those 3 companies is Microsoft. So when they bought 3 Mile Island, I was very happy. I have nothing to do with small modular reactors, which are the future. But Dan is the smartest guy I know, and I want you to hear more from him. Let me check the markets first, as I do every hour. every first hour of every show on behalf of American Federal, AmericanFederal.com. That's AmFed, Gold, Coin, and Bullion. Nick Grovich and his team sell and buy gold. And today, gold is at $2,727, an all-time new high for me. What happened yesterday? Well, the Dow was up, the Nasdaq was up, the S&P was down a little bit, but there's some exuberance in the marketplace at the prospect of Donald Trump's return, because that means that the tax cuts will be extended. Indeed, they'll be refined and deepened if Donald Trump has his way. And so if you call 1-800-221-7694, 1-800-221-7694, you'll talk to Nick or one of his handful of partners and colleagues, and they will walk you through gold. And right now, gold is on a run. I mean, some people like to buy rising stocks and rising materials, and some people will say, okay, my price point's $2,750, because if it goes that high, it must be going to $3,000. And some people are going to sell their gold. I am neutral. I don't do anything. I just buy stuff and keep it. I am not a trader. I am not in it. But if I buy gold next, it will be with Nick Grovich, because, as I tell all of you, I sat down with Nick and begged him to become a sponsor because he's been with Dennis for so long. And no complaint, straight up, honest as the day is long. Buy or sell your gold with Nick Grovich. 1-800-221-7694, or go to AmericanFederal.com. You can't do better than AmFed, Gold and Coin. Gold and Bullion, I mean. 1-800-221-7694. Dan Poneman, former Deputy Secretary of Energy, joined me yesterday. The long conversation we posted at my YouTube channel. It'll be on my podcast today. It's a good half hour on why nuclear power is being resurrected in real time rapidly by private capital, by Microsoft, by others, because we must double our energy baseload. It absolutely is essential to beat back the Red Chinese in their effort to dominate the world. Here's more of my conversation with Dan Poneman. Dan Poneman, on Monday of this week, the Fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I hosted some of our friends in Maine that we won't be seeing until the spring, because we're leaving on tomorrow to come back to the Beltway. And one of them is Tony. One nickname is Two Speeds Tony because he goes fast and faster in his boat. And the other one is Tony CRE because he's the best commercial real estate expert in Maine. And I asked him, where would you put him in Maine? He said, well, there are at least 4 sites that could be permitted pretty quickly if we got people interested in that. Can modulars work in every state?
Well, I haven't done a geological study, but to a first order, small modular reactors have a much smaller footprint, much smaller exclusion zone. So I would say to a first order, it's highly likely that they are going to be deployable virtually anywhere. I would note Bill Gates, in his excellent book about avoiding a climate disaster, makes a one-sentence argument for nuclear power, and he basically says it is the only form of carbon-free power that has been proved to work day and night, season in, season out, deployable virtually anywhere in the world, that has been proved to work at large scale. So I think the SMR footprint of available sites is vast and certainly satisfactory for the need.
I have never heard of Kairos until this week. Are there other Kairoses out there, or do they have first mover advantage in small nuclear reactors? SMRs, they're called, small modular reactors.
There's a whole wave, Hugh. I mean, think of the automobile industry in the early 1900s. A lot of companies out there, the Stanley Steamer and many others. So there's a thing called the Advanced Reactor Development Program that selected 10 reactors, 2 for big demonstration projects. One of those is called TerraPower, which is a company founded by Bill Gates. It has a liquid sodium reactor, one that's called X Energy that uses a high temperature gas cooled reactor. There are light water based reactor designs that are out there, such as the GE BWRX 300, such as NuScale, such as Holtec. There are other liquid metal designs such as Oklo. So it's a very exciting phase in the industry, a lot of innovation. And frankly, one of the things that has to happen is we need to see what we're now starting to see, which is major investments being made in some of these, including Kairos, which is a great company, And that's really going to separate the wheat from the chaff, because now you have literally dozens of these designs that are out there being promoted. And between the need to downsize in terms of how much regulatory burden the NRC can manage, and the need for sort of capital to migrate to a certain few reactors that can be successful, as opposed to spreading the resources over too many reactors that none of them get developed, you're going to see, I think, a number getting developed, because they have different use cases. The last thing I'll say about this is, for example, in the advantages that these small reactors have over conventional ones, some of them have very high outlet temperatures. And that's the attractive thing which led X Energy to do a deal with Dow Chemical, because we have to not only decarbonize power generation, we have to decarbonize industry. And they're going to be building a plant down in Seadrift, Texas, that's going to support the production of all kinds of chemical products and plastics and so forth. And Nucor Steel also is a tremendous industry leader in this. You're going to increasingly see small modular reactors being used to promote not only electricity generation, but also other industrial processes.
All right,
So
let's
Dan
pause it there.
Poneman,
I'm going to put the whole thing on a separate YouTube video over at my YouTube channel, so that anyone who's as interested in this as I, it's the future. We need energy. Energy is freedom. Energy is everything that allows us to do it. And if you're worried about climate change or global warming, or you just need power in a hurry, small modular reactors are the way to go. Dan Poneman explains it. I've got an interview request into Elon Musk. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be able to understand him, because I can understand Dan. They slow down for the non-scientific people like myself. But I am going to be putting the whole thing up there, send it around to everyone. And when some firm opens up that accepts small, I'm an investor in QCityCapital.com/Hugh. They syndicate money into apartment complexes. I don't want to own an apartment complex, and I don't want to own a nuclear power company. I want to be an investor in a fund that invests in small modular reactors, because it is the future. If you know what that is, let me know. In the meantime, let me bring you up to speed on the polling. Donald Trump is ahead everywhere. In the Real Clear Politics average of all 7 swing states, Donald Trump is up 0.8%. Kamala Harris remains a 1.2% ahead in the national average, but it looks like Trump is surging. He certainly has surged on the betting markets, but there's a story today that someone may be manipulating the Bitcoin-driven, cryptocurrency-driven poly market. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'd rather be Trump right now than Harris. Doesn't mean anything. Does mean that Harris should have showed up last night, because you're weak. You're very weak when you don't even show up at the Al Smith dinner. I'll be right back, America. Ben Domenech is next as the Hugh Hewitt Show rolls along on this Friday. That Sinwar is dead and the Guardians are alive. Joined by Ben Domenech, editor-at-large at The Spectator, Fox News contributor, and my weekly guest on Friday morning to review the week that was. Ben, in a nutshell, here's the big takeaway. Sinwar is dead, the Guardians are alive, and Joe Biden remains addled. Did you happen to watch the Guardians game last night?
Well, I was just talking to your producer about this. It felt, for the first chunk, it felt like a very normal or on track to be a Cleveland victory. And so I went to bed early. I missed all of early. I went to bed before all.
I got so disgusted when the best reliever in the history of Cleveland, Emmanuel Clase, gives up back-to-back home runs. One of them, of course, to Aaron Judge. And I turn off the TV and I stop.
If that happens, that's when they need you. That's when they need you, Hugh, to keep watching.
Well, I came back, of course. That's just after 63 years of following the Guardians, formerly the Indians. You do turn off and walk away in disgust a lot, but they came back. It may be the best baseball game I've ever watched. But it came on,
especially. I mean,
and Big Christmas. Big Christmas is like Big Papa and Big Papi in Boston. We love him. Now, Ben, let's first talk about Joe Biden in Berlin this morning. Sinwar is dead. The Israelis have killed everyone, like they killed Nasrallah and Haniya and everybody who does anything in Hezbollah. They've killed everybody in Hamas. They've got Mohammed Sinwar still there with at least 50 alive hostages. Well, we have to pray for them. So Joe Biden lands in Berlin and says, quote, "Now is the time to move on towards a ceasefire in Gaza. Make sure that we move in a direction that we're going to be in a position to make things better for the whole world." Honest to goodness, how do we make it to January, Ben?
Look, I watched a little bit of the Al Smith dinner. I don't know if you caught any of it, but the fact that former President Trump had the line about if you really wanted someone to not be here, we could have just invited Joe. It's
Yeah.
a very fair statement. I mean, it's not even really a joke. And I actually think that the underrated, most shocking moment of that Bret Baier interview with Kamala was her inability to navigate that. Because the real reason, of course, that she can't navigate it is because of what we see on a daily basis, on a rolling, reality show that's playing out in front of us of a president who isn't there. He's just not there mentally. He's not there in any capacity that is, able to lead the free world. And I know that it's one, thing to have something like that. The theoretical idea of replacing the president of the United States with a ham and cheese sandwich. Well, America, that's what you've got right now. And ham and cheese sandwich, it turns out, is not what you want in the Oval Office, sitting at the Resolute desk when there's a lot of stuff happening in the world that could go sideways and a lot of things on fire. And
the reality, Ben, for me is that I think right now Bibi Netanyahu is the leader of the West. I know some people hate him, but he has courage.
Some people, look, a lot of people hate him. And I think that, look, we need to look back at the last year and appreciate the fact that I don't think that there's anyone else in the history of politics in the modern era who would have been able to withstand the pressure, the international pressure, the pressure even from his allies, including from the United States, to have a ceasefire earlier in this process, to shut things down, to accept essentially less than half a loaf, and to move on. And I think that Netanyahu, for all of his flaws, and he does have flaws, is someone who was uniquely capable in this moment of saying, no, we're going to go to the end. And I think that in this point, he has been completely vindicated in that. They told him not to go into Rafah, and this is what happened. And they're going to be taking a victory lap. I mean, Kamala Harris has already flip-flopped and praised this. My friend Ryan Gerdesky was pointing this out on CNN last night. It's like, how quickly can she go from saying, don't you dare go into Rafah, we'll cut off aid, we'll cut off things to you, to, oh, this is great, you kill some.
I'm pretty sure by the end of the day she's going to say she studied the maps and told Israel where to find him.
Yes, I was in the room. I was the last in the room to make that happen. It's absolutely abhorrent the way that she and Joe Biden have played out over the course of this. And we have to respect that Bibi Netanyahu had the steel in his spine to withstand all of this and to achieve something that I think many of us, even with our respect for what the Israeli military and their intelligence services are capable of, to achieve something that I think really did seem impossible on the face of it. And that's something that I think is going to result in a stronger Israel, in a more steadfast position for them, and in destroying their enemies as opposed to having to negotiate them on terms where they have to have their hands tied behind their back. And that's something
it's
that
been
I think
remarkable.
we
Now,
should
Ben, here's the
absolutely
question. This is the big question. I'll come to the horse race after we talk about whether or not Kamala would be the most anti-Israel president in the Jewish state's history since 1947 and 48. I think unquestionably she would be, because there's not a thought in her head on Israel that isn't put there by her left-wing advisors. I think it would be a disaster for the Jewish state. And I'm appealing to my friends who are supporters of Israel, both Jewish and non-Jewish, please vote for Donald Trump. He will be with Israel, and she will not be. Am I being alarmist, or am I right?
I don't think you're being alarmist at all on that point. And I have to be, look, I don't have the level of dislike or of even, in some portions, hatred for the Cheney family that exists on the right. But I really thought that the moment that was, in terms of crossing over and endorsing her this cycle, it was really disappointing to me for a lot of reasons, but in particular because they know that she is no friend of Israel. They know that she is no friend of America's allies. And even with the personal animus and feelings about Donald Trump that exist with them, to me, that is just a hard stop no. It's a brick wall. You can't have somebody in office who is going to undermine America's greatest ally in the Middle East the way that she would and the way that she has telegraphed that she would. And look, my feeling is, combine the fact that she did this interview with Charlemagne where she talks openly about still sticking to her 2019 commitment to have a broad-based study on a case for reparations. Combine that with her calls for ceasefire and her undermining of the Jewish state, and it's as if she's closing out her 2024 campaign with a platform written by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's the most radical and really it's not even progressive. It's an anti-Israel and frankly anti-American stance to take on both of those counts, and I find it just completely abhorrent. We can't. The idea.
Ben, I want to interrupt for a second because my
Israel.
long-standing friendship with the Cheney family goes back to when I worked for Lynn at NEH in 1985.
Yeah, I actually knew that you did that. Yes.
Yeah, and the vice president is a friend and an advisor when I was back at the Nixon. Liz was at Nixon Foundation. Liz was a friend. I consider her a friend still, so she's very mad at me. Here's my theory. The parents are supporting the daughter. The daughter doesn't recognize the sunk costs she invested heavily in. It's the fallacy of sunk costs. And she can't be for anybody but Kamala because of what she said about Trump. So I just disregard that. I think the parents are just supporting the daughter. Fair?
I don't know about the internal family dynamic. I do think that there's a sunk cost thing here. And the point is that, just let me put it this way, I think Liz is a lot smarter than Adam Kinzinger. So
amen.
So it's not.
Liz is very smart, but she's got a lot of sunk costs here, and it's the worst thing in life not to recognize sunk costs.
Yeah, you gotta move on. Anyway, the just to get back to the overall point, you are completely correct in saying that Kamala Harris would be the most anti-Israel president that we have elected since the existence of the state, and I think that that's something that is absolutely abhorrent. But I also think that in this moment, regardless of your opinion of how capable Joe Biden is to do the job for the next couple of months, you have to be praying and hoping that there is not something that blows up on the scene in the next 3 months that he's going to have to handle, because God help us if it does. And, we've seen some of these developments, the North Koreans aligning with Russia when it comes to...
North Koreans have sent 12,000 troops to Russia, yes, according to Times of Israel this morning.
Yes. There is a recipe for things going even worse than they already are in the next, 90 plus days. And that's something that I think we have to be very concerned about when something like that plays out. But of course, the worst case scenario is it really is Kamala who has to end up in the room making some of these decisions, and we're going to have to live with the consequences of that and deal with it. But look, I am hopeful, Hugh, that this is going to be something that is at least a learning experience for some people in politics, including some people on the right, by the way.
Ben, right now, the RCP average has Donald Trump winning all of the swing states. So I'm getting that 2012 feeling, which makes me worried. It makes me feel like I felt when Clause came in last night in the 7th and gave up 2 home runs, which is whenever I'm feeling good, things go bad. A, what do you think about the race? And B, what do you make of people saying that Kamala's sit down with Bret Baier was other than a catastrophe for her?
Well, you and me both, because the presidential election that I called wrong, I've called them pretty consistently right, was 12, because I thought that was going to win. And so I think that one of these things that, we have in the back of our heads as people who've lived the experience is, okay, this feels a little too safe to be confident. And I think when you look at that interview and when you look at the approach that she had to it, I really think it was a mistake. And the takeaway that I had was, why agree to do this if you're not going to try to use it to win more votes? Because from my perspective, what she did was she went into the Fox, situation with the attitude of, I'm going to gin up support online and from my base by being combative and by sticking to my talking points and by not giving an inch and not really saying anything different than I have been saying. I'm going to stick to everything that I've been saying. I'm not going to have anything new. And that is, to me, completely the wrong approach.
It was malpractice. Do you think they bet on the fact that Bret Baier is the nicest guy in broadcast? And I say that Bret's kind of a friend, but I'm not a Fox News contributor. You are. I only work with Bret a couple of times a month.
He's a velvet hammer, though. He's nice, but he'll ask a tough question. And I think that he did frame some of these questions in a way that I think was a little more confrontational than she would have gotten, from a different interviewer. But one of the things that I think she could have done in that moment is to go in saying, I'm going to say 2 or 3 things differently than I've been saying them. And I'm going to pick in advance what those things are, because the questions are going to be predictable. They're going to ask me about immigration. They're going to ask me about the economy. They're going to ask me about Joe Biden. And I'm going to say things that are a little bit different because the audience that I have is a little bit different. And what I'm going to try to do in this interview is to get a handful of those voters in a swing state like Pennsylvania, like Georgia, to say, you know what, I was leaning toward Trump, but actually she's okay. And that, to me, is something that she could have done with a couple of different steps. And one of them, I really don't know why she hasn't done this, Hugh. I still think that she could have run a campaign where she established herself as the tough girl boss who's going to demand results for you, meaning that Joe Biden, and she almost did it. She said one of the lines that I've said before on this program, which is that, she could say, Joe Biden's been in Washington a long time. I haven't. He has a lot of loyalty to people that I think is, admirable as a trait generally. But when they don't get the job done, I'm going to demand results. And we didn't get the job done when it came to the border and security and demanding that we vet these people. Lean into what Bill Clinton said about the Laken Riley situation. Say, we actually need to demand that the people who come in, we know who they are, and we keep criminals who are going to kill people out, and we do everything that we can to make our border secure. And I commit to the American people that under my presidency, that border will be secure.
Ben, for the benefit of people who are from Mars, I have been doing this since 1990. 5 years of radio in L.A., 10 years of nightly television in L.A. This is the 25th year of a national radio show, 5 years with NBC.
Congratulations. I didn't know this was year 25.
Yeah, this is year 25 of this program, and Dwayne somehow has managed to survive it. But my point is, I don't get mad very often, but when someone says they've got 10 minutes, I'll give them 10 minutes. I expect to get 3 or 4 questions. If you filibuster me, I get mad. Her team is awful. They should never have tried to work Brett by showing up late and stopping early. And they did not negotiate whether or not he would use video. And so he used video, and he brought up the 71% wrong direction slide. I think she got completely flustered. And I worry that anyone who does anything that's different and not expected sends her spinning off into outer space. What about my theory? They shouldn't have tried to screw Brett. They did, and then she wasn't ready for the video and the payback.
Well, I'll go a step further. Imagine if in this interview, the person who said that they wanted to go another round was Kamala Harris. The person who said,
Amen.
No, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I can do this all day. I didn't hear no bell. Let's go. And I just think this is a situation where if you're going to do a tough interview like this, or what people anticipate to be a tough interview, the way that you come across as being strong and being firm in your commitment is not by having your staff desperately rapping you, showing up late, trying to shorten things up and filibustering. Instead, what you say is, oh no, I can take any question. I'm ready for this. I'm fully prepared and vetted, and I know that I can handle anything that you throw at me. And instead, it comes across as being flustered, as not being ready. It comes across as filibustering through questions. By the way, where it was almost as if Brett would try to redirect her because he's trying to get her to say. And just for people who have not done something like this, it's a tactic to sort of say, okay, when I'm asking this question, I know what her answer is going to be because I know what her talking points are. And so when she starts saying her talking points, I'm going to try to redirect because I don't want to get the same thing that we've already heard 100 times. I want to get to the actual thing that's behind those talking points that we haven't gotten to yet. Okay?
I think Brett was serving his audience. I think Americans would genuinely like to hear her say something that isn't vapid. Just prove to us that you're not utterly an empty box.
Yeah. And I think in this case, Brett is also mindful that he's going to have a bunch of people criticizing him afterwards. Oh, he's a man talking over a woman, or whatever they're going to say. Whatever Brian Stelter is going to say the next day. The thing that I think is absurd about that, of course, is that he's just trying to get to the core answer. He's trying to get to the thing that she doesn't necessarily want to address. One in particular, of course, was that question back and forth about the fact that she's been in office for the past 3.5 years. And I love, by the way, that was my favorite moment of the whole interview, was that she says, "You know what I'm talking about," and he says, "Actually, I don't."
That was my second favorite. I think it was brilliant to open by asking for a number. How many people have come in? Because that is a fact question, not an opinion question, not a promise question. She couldn't answer it, Ben.
Yeah, and
or
I
she
think,
wouldn't.
Look. There's a way that this interview plays out where we come away with it saying, I don't like Kamala Harris. I don't agree with her ideology, but she handled that impressively, and I think that there are a lot of people who could have come away from this saying that, but they aren't saying that because she didn't. And they didn't, and she didn't in part because I think they were too scared about unscripted moments, which they've been this whole time, which to me is absurd. You should actually have the confidence. If you're going to trust your reliever, you roll out with them, and you roll out with them in the toughest moments. And the simple fact that they don't do that they don't trust her in those moments, to me, that's an indictment of this whole effort, an indictment of this whole campaign. They do not trust her to handle herself with Brett Baer. What is she going to be like when she's sitting across from Vladimir Putin, when she's sitting across from Xi? It's just not something that I think that anybody can look at and say, we have confidence in this woman, regardless of ideology, that she can represent the United States with strength and with purpose.
I think she's hemorrhaging. I'm going to come back with Ben and talk one more moment about the horse race politics of this and how, with 20 days to go, what Donald Trump has to do is not sit on a lead, but has to be very smart about his lead. If you want to hear the blow-by-blow, the evisceration of Kamala Harris's sit down with Brett Barrett, listen to Megyn Kelly's podcast or listen to the Commentary podcast. I want to go to a theory that has floated around the Commentary gang for a while, Ben. When Biden was running, they thought he had the worst campaign staff ever, that his advisors were just terrible, that they made every wrong political decision. I think they all moved over to Kamala, and she got a terrible team. And this goes to professionalism. I've dealt with campaigns forever. I was only an operative once in '76, and I tell you, they weren't trusting the youth director of the Massachusetts campaign to do anything important. But he had Stuart Spencer. I mean, he had good people. What do you make of her team? I think they're awful.
Yeah, I think there's been numerous moments of campaign malpractice. Ironically, the worst one that the worst one that they've had in the last 2 weeks was whoever allowed anybody to take video of Tim Walz trying to load a gun. But
yes,
one of the things that I think is happening here in this horse race, though, Hugh, is as bad as this campaign team is, and I think this is the question that is on the minds of a lot of Republicans. The ground game, the effort to get people to vote early, especially from the Republican side, is a real question mark. There's infighting that we know of in a lot of different circumstances among Democrats in Pennsylvania, for instance. There's a big Political report about that yesterday, and a number of other states where the shift from Joe Biden to Kamala was not something that happened comfortably. But I do think that the overarching question is this something that is going to get botched by the Trump Republican effort simply because they don't necessarily have a competitive ground game the way that they ought to? And that's something that has been outsourced in a number of states to organizations like Turning Point. And there's question marks about that have been raised repeatedly by a number of different Republican operatives, to me and to other Republicans.
Can I raise the possibility with you, Ben, with 3 minutes? I don't think it matters because I think people are very engaged.
That's the thing that I'm leaning toward lately, because I think that the fundamentals of this election are so hardcore and so base-centric that I don't think it's ultimately going to be a decisive factor. And so because of that, I think the incompetence on the top scale actually matters more than any kind of botch that happens lower down, which is sometimes something that you see, in some of these campaigns. And one thing in particular that I think is going to be, really demonstrative of this in the final weeks is you look at something like this agenda rollout for black men.
Oh, God, and unconstitutional from first to last. I'm giving you dope and money.
From the first glance, had to expand it to everybody. And it's like, okay, wait a minute. You're making some last-ditch throw spaghetti at the wall effort because you're doing so poorly among black men. The dynamics that are going to decide this election, from my perspective, Hugh, are going to be this. how much of the college-educated male vote does she bleed, and how much of the non-college women vote does he gain? Because those are the two most volatile elements at this point. Meaning,
and how many new voters come, Ben? I'll add that. Okay, I want to do my best John McLaughlin.
Okay.
Ben Domenech, exit question. Donald Trump, winner or loser on November 5? Ben.
I'm going to say he doesn't win until about the 7th or the 8th because we're going to have to wait for Pennsylvania and Arizona.
But he's going to win.
But I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win, yeah.
Here's my nightmare, is that it's all going to come down to North Carolina somehow, and we're going to be voting for...
Lord have mercy, Hugh.
Oh,
please,
Lord have
no,
mercy indeed.
Say a rosary for us, please.
We are running a relief campaign, and my audience is very generous in trying to get help there, but my goodness, it's a mess. And their turnout yesterday in Winston-Salem, where my son's father-in-law lives, was out the door with early voting. And I think mountain folk and folks from Asheville can vote anywhere they want in North Carolina. I just think I'm feeling pretty good right now. We'll check back in next Friday,
Ben. I think he's going to win. I just think it's going to take a couple days. I do not think it's going to be an early night, unfortunately. And for
that's why I'm
the other
starting at 5 a.m. the next morning.
Need their Red Bull supply.
B. Domenech on X. People love the Weekend Review with Ben Domenech because he actually knows what he's talking about, unlike so many people that you see on a couple of the cable networks. Thank you, Ben. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. I've been doing at least a candidate a day from a critical race. I want to turn our attention to North Carolina's 1st Congressional District, where Colonel Lori Buckhout is running, and she's retired United States Army combat veteran. Great candidate. She's been on before, but I wanted to get back and find out what it's like trying to run a congressional campaign after a hurricane ravages your state. Welcome back, Colonel. How goes it?
Hugh, how are you?
I'm great.
I'll tell you, man, we are hitting it hard here. We are putting in the miles and working our butts off here. So, yeah, it's going great here.
Let's find out your campaign website because, again, I put these up so that people who want to invest in competitive races that we must win know. Lori Buckhout could win. She needs resources. What's the campaign website?
It's www.loribuckoutforcongress.com, and you spell Buckout, B-U-C-K-H-O-U-T.
We have Steelers fans listening, so it's L-A-U-R-I-E, Buckout.com.
You got it.
B-U-C-K-H-O-U-T.com. Tell people where the 1st district is and how has the hurricane impacted voting, if at all?
Well, I tell you what, we've been blessed. The hurricane hit out west, and we're on the East Coast. So we went across the border of Virginia at the bottom and covered down on a chunk of the northeast section of the coast. Got a little bit of beach. And then we go along the border. We got a lot of farmland. We have one urban area, Rocky Mount. But beyond that, it is a really rural area, a lot of farms, a lot of families, a lot of working families, a lot of farmers.
But did it dodge the bullet then? A lot of people in North Carolina are still out of communication, so you didn't get hit?
No, it did, thank God. And I'll tell you what, we are working very hard here in the midst of early voting to send relief out west. I mean, the whole state's mobilized. It is really just terrible out there. So if we're not focused on early voting, we're focused on sending folks out west to take care of them. Really tough situation out there, and it certainly is, a lot for the state to juggle at one time.
Oh, my goodness. And I know that the election board, which is bipartisan, has made some adjustments for voters who have been displaced by Helene. We continue to raise money for the victims of Helene over at HughHewitt.com. Food for the Poor has partnered with us. Colonel, what's it coming down to in the final days? How do you feel about it? And what's the RD rating in North Carolina? One again is an even district?
It is even, but slightly R. It's like an R1 now. So, you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I think what it's come down to is money. So here's how the race looks. In terms of getting out there and meeting with voters and seeing folks and seeing the issues on the ground, I've definitely got a leg up because people have seen me more than they've seen their elected representative. It's like Don Davis, who's my opponent. He's kind of one of these typical Democrats who likes to sit back and sort of just, enjoy the fact that he's elected. He hasn't been on the ground meeting voters or meeting his constituents. So I've seen more of the district than he has, which is kind of wild. But it's coming down to money because, of course, Democrats are pouring all kinds of money into this race. In fact, his top donors come from New York and California. That's where his
What
top
a
donors
surprise.
come from.
Yeah.
What a surprise.
So that's why this audience, find 25, find 50, find 100, or if you can, the maximum
Oh, yeah.
$3,300. LaurieBuckhout.com, LaurieBuckhout.com. Laurie, do you have a campaign canvas staff or people out there getting the early vote to turn out?
Oh, tons. Let me tell you. So they have sent Trump Force 47 down here in eastern North Carolina. So we're partnering with the Trump team. We are endless. We're out everywhere. The NRCC and GOP have sent in congressmen from all over America to come get votes with me. We're knocking doors together. I've got them from Georgia. I've got them from Florida. Got them from Pennsylvania coming in to help me out. We've got senators coming in. We've got governors coming in to help out Trump 47 and me together in eastern North Carolina. You've got Laura Trump coming in. Trump's been to the state several times. He's coming again on Monday. It is a really pleasant surprise. I'm a first-time candidate, seeing how the entire GOP is pulling for Trump and pulling for me. It's really heartening.
And I hope my audience steps up, because you got a lot of different media markets you have to advertise on, correct?
I've got 3, so everything we do here is triple the buy. So it is very expensive. I never dreamed how expensive it would be. It's crazy.
Well, Laurie Buckhout, I hope the Hugh Hewitt audience is with you. Certainly, we are praying for North Carolina. I'm glad that your district was unravaged and that you're sending help out to the mountains. But just keep coming back. Let's check in again before the end of the election cycle. Buckhout.com. Colonel, thank you. I appreciate your getting up early and giving us the update. Any polling, by the way?
Well, I tell you, it's interesting. So Davis has me polling behind. We have us polling ahead. The NRCC did a poll last week, and I got a text 2 days ago from Speaker Johnson. Speaker Mike came in and said, Laurie, you're doing great. We're sending you another $1.4 million.
Now, I love that, but that does not mean those are not hard dollars. Those dollars don't go as far as your dollars, America. That's great. By the way, when the NRCC comes in, that means they know they can win. That means you, America, can help Colonel Buckhout and really make a difference, because maybe one more ad. I always go back to the Norm Al Franken race, and Senator Norm Coleman was a good friend. We should have gone back one more time, and he would have won. We should have had one more event, one more ad. It could be a 10-vote race, right? Right.
Well, I tell you what, even with that ad from NRCC, we're still behind. They have crazy money coming in from crazy people, and so we are still behind in the fundraising because Democrats always bring in more, and they bring in a whole lot from a lot of interesting sources that we don't.
Well, you've been under fire before. Colonel's been to combat. Right. She's not going to be flappable. Thank you, Colonel. Come back in a week or so and keep us posted, because North Carolina 1 is going to go on the board early that night on election night. And if we win, we're in great shape. Thank you, Colonel.
Sir. Thank you, Hugh. Take care.
You too. It's Friday. That means Sarah Bedford joins us. She keeps her eye on all things on the Hill. Good morning, Sarah. Welcome back. Sarah C. Bedford on X. Sarah, I assume everyone is gone in their district and campaigning unless they have the safest of seats. What is Mike Johnson up to? I just heard from Laurie Buckhout down in North Carolina. He called her up and they sent another tranche of money. I think he's studying the map like Kamala did with Rafa, only this time he can read an electoral map and she can't read a combat map.
Yeah, Mike Johnson has been hitting the trail for embattled members. He's actually been really aggressively fundraising, not quite at McCarthy levels, but certainly getting there, learning the ropes on that. I think that, he's also allowed a number of reporters from sort of corporate media to trail him as well, to write stories about the influence that he's been gaining over the Republican Party. So he's kept a really busy schedule, and he's swatted down all of these requests from the hurricane to come back to approve more Small Business Administration money, more money for FEMA, really focusing on those races to keep a majority in the House.
Now, the fact that the Small Business Administration is out of money does not compute to me, because weren't they included in the CR that got passed to get us past the election?
Yeah, I mean, they really quickly exhausted the disaster loans program that they have. But that was sort of the argument from congressional Republicans, right? Was that we just gave big tranches of money to all of these agencies, and we'll be back in a few weeks in mid-November, so we can deal with it then. This one disaster loan program, SBA says they don't have enough money to keep handing out loans to businesses to keep afloat during these next few weeks, but that's seen as a lot less politically urgent than the FEMA situation seemed right after Hurricane Helene and then heading into Milton.
Now, Sarah, I'm coming back to the Beltway tomorrow, and I would like to get your sense of how people feel. This is not scientific. I know what the numbers are. Trump is winning in the averages, but it's too close to call. It's really a coin toss. And I told a crowd at Hobart and William Smith colleges last night, I zoomed in to do their program on behalf of their president, Mark Guerin, who's one of my oldest and dearest friends. I said, anybody who tells you they know the end result here is lying. But how do people sound to you? You're very good at picking up cues and body language. Who's got the confidence right now?
Certainly Republicans. They'd rather be in their position than in the Democrats. I think there's a growing sense of cautious optimism among Republicans, and some have some unbridled optimism. But I think that, there's a realization that the closeness of the race could still tip it towards Kamala Harris in the end. But there's this anticipation that potentially the situation is worse for Harris than what the polls are showing, and that internal numbers on both sides are showing something more akin to wider Trump victory, one that might even be known on election night, not dragged out for days of
God, I
counting.
pray. I don't want to work for a week. Let me close with this. There are some people trying to spin her catastrophe, Kamala's catastrophe with Brett Baer, as somehow a positive for her. I've seen them on TV. They're paid to say things like this, and they might be working for Team Harris, and their contract depends on the MSNBC nutters tuning in. Does anyone really believe that that she did a good job? I mean, really believe it?
No, I mean, we're 2 weeks away from the election, and Kamala Harris is still in the persuasion phase of the campaign. That's why she did that interview, according to her own surrogates, to try to woo over undecided Republicans. That part of the campaign should be over. Now is the time for Trump and Harris to be activating their voters, getting out their base. People's minds are made up about what they stand for, but she's still out there rolling out new policies, trying to reach voters that she hasn't reached before. When that window is more or less closed, it's time to switch to a turnout operation. And the best her surrogates could do to defend that performance was to say, well, at least she showed up and did it, when Donald Trump has been doing adversarial interviews every week since the primaries began in early 2023.
Oh my gosh, he's the best interview in America, and that remains so even after he's given like 40 in the last 2 weeks. Sarah C. Bedford on X, thank you. I look forward to seeing you election week. I hope all goes well with you. Let me close this hour by telling you the Hillsdale Dialogue is coming up. We're going back to Plato because we end every week by looking at eternal things, at lasting things, at higher things. I do want to urge your prayer for the hostages, because the death of Sinwar, last night after the Guardians' amazing comeback, I saw Dan Sinwar put out an emergency Call Me Back podcast with Haviv Redigur and Nadiv Adal, and I had to listen to it. So at midnight, I'm listening to 40 minutes on what's going on. The real concern is that Sinwar's little brother is the only guy left standing, and he's crazy. So pray for the hostages. Pray that the remaining Hamas people take the offer, get on a boat, and leave, and turn over the living hostages and the bodies of the dead. Really pray hard for them. And be as generous as you can for hurricane relief. Food for the Poor knows how to steward your money. I don't really care if Mike beats me. I'd like to beat him, but of course what I really care about is whether you give to Gallagher or you give through me to Food for the Poor. My banner's at HughHewitt.com. His is at Mike Online. Whatever you do, just give, because they need our help, and Americans stick together.